across the Pill Bridge above the Tor into the junction, the end of the North Devon line. Ending now where once in August 1854 high hopes began, and nothing of them now but a tenuous link with Exeter, but memories all the way. It began down in the hole, the cutting below Exeter Queen Street, a railway yard like a royal parade ground. For all the majesty of the Southern came here, King Arthur, Sir Kay, Morgan le Fay, a sort of turn round table after the crusade from Waterloo. And from here, engines with regimental numbers took the war west of the Credy, through the North Devon outback, to forge a link with Arthur's seat at Tintagel. The old green banner of the Southern still has the air of a mission, and where else but a cathedral city would put an ultra-rail around a departure bay. But Camelot has been lost. The links are overrun. The furthest outpost pushed back to Barnstaple. But you still drop down from Central along the right-hand curve of the Exeter incline to dive through 200 yards of echoing tunnel. A squad of banker engines patrolled it, escorts for the Devon Bell, the Atlantic coasters. And driver Proust remembers the double-headed blast bouncing off the roof, swamping the cab, and knocking a young fireman flat with noise. For a moment you hover over St Davids before the swoop down to the old Great Western line. Brunel's 6-footers lorded it down there, granting a passport to southern trains from here to Cowley Bridge. So you come into St Davids with that keep to one side, immigrants only feeling reserved for platform 4. For God's wonderful railway is still there, as plain as the concrete letters over the station entrance. Too deep for new brooms. The intercities clatter up from Cornwall, bound for stops with the old western names: Cheltenham, Westbury, Reading. The old water tower is a monument to the steamers, when long-distance crews bedded down in it. Dormitories, roofed over with a few thousand gallons of water. New men were warned, if you have to get up in the night, don't pull anything. There's no steam to smother the footbridge, but enough sunlight and suitcases to give that old excitement of a mainline stop. And you'll remember a different time, a time beyond compare, when high days began on high platforms and ended with a flash of sea green beyond the lattice work of the home signal. At the northern end of St Davids is a controlled crossing where main road traffic tries to beat mainline trains. The barriers snip off the passing parade with every notch on the timetable. You can't raise a camera without someone putting on a daily act hell-bent on suicide. The road north is hemmed in by stockyards on both sides for 1.5 miles to Cowley Bridge. The landlords always reserved the right of way, with scant regard for southern trains, Guard Jimmy Beer remembers shunting 30 Barnstaple wagons across this main line, just 2 minutes ahead of a Plymouth Express. The kind of thing turns a young man's fancies into thoughts of insurance. Cowley Bridge, where the Taunton Road will swing away to the right. So let's look back along the train to see that main line swerve northwards. Once over the viaduct, the stretch to Crediton is flat upland country with a slight down gradient to help the timetable. Driver Tom Davy remembered how southern timings were tight, with a running time for each section. Losing a minute on one meant making up for it on the next fast stretch. But some of the guards wouldn't flag an early start. They'd keep the train sitting there strictly to schedule. Until the very last lap, no guard could control a driver who wanted to set up a record, say, from Chapelton to the junction. Newton St Cyrs, with only 3 trains daily. In the old days, it was a good stop for tips. Being the last stop before Exeter, London passengers wanted time and to spare for the changeover, with a bit of change over for the guard. One traveller arrived at Exeter to see his Waterloo disappear up the incline. "Driver, what went wrong your end? I tipped the guard my end." "I'll tell you what, sir, you tipped the wrong bloody end." Crediton. 6 lorries once served the yards. Besides the farms, there were factories in the town making sweets. So there was an assorted mixture of comings and goings with grain, fertilizers, machinery. And there's a Victorian box with the same kind of old-fashioned hospitality, where we together watched the ballast train come up from the railway's own quarries at Meldon. The box holds a watching brief on the 15 miles of freight line, besides controlling another 15 of the Barnstaple line, down to the nearest passing loop at Eggesford. Out of Crediton, we eased to the right, as if to make room for all those ghosts, for over there ran the Plymouth part of the Atlantic Coast Express, cresting the Dartmoor purple to the blue of Plymouth Sound. And wartime trains took the safest West Country route through Yeoford, where there were no quiet nights for signalmen. New rails spread out to take American Red Cross trains until D-Day, with blood-red benedictions on each coach. And here it is, Yeoford, and no time to stop, for it's all quiet nights and days, without signalmen. Past Yeoford is the site of Ilfracombe Junction, where the old Plymouth line will part company. There it goes, leaving us on the one remaining tendon of the withered arm. Once 10 daily services, 17 on Saturdays, brought the summer crowds to Torridge and beyond. Coaches packed with the sand dwellers up to Mortehoe and Croyd, and the first-class travellers for the hotels down in Coombe. And once, way back in the 30s, all those +4s and Tweed for the little Linton trains, which whistled away through Barham and got lost in Exmoor landscapes. Lapford, with a platform offset on each side of the Exeter road. So let's look back at Rail Clerk Frank Beer's memories of those Best Kept Station Awards, when country staffs filled out station names in pansies and pebbles. Lapford was 5 times champion, while most of the working parts went with the flowers, though up the road some of it's still in partnership, giving an all day all clear to Sharps Express. The foul veiled gloom of a decaying halt shares the summer silence with deserted yards. The old dairy factory closed years back. The building is a store for second-hand goods, used bargains in a worn-out siding. But from here to Eggesford, the route is all summer green, laced with the loops of the Taw. The new box at Eggesford stands on the bank of the Taw. The old one resisted the impulse for years, then took the plunge, helped out by a dredger, which knocked it off its feet. They built the new box wrong way round, which helps it, I suppose, to keep an eye on the river. There were extensive sidings back of this hotel, and beyond this wall, a weekly market for neighbouring farms. This outhouse was a coal store, with its own rail siding coming up through all that greenery. Today it's the only crossing point on the line, and for a moment the railway noises are all hushed in the sleepy summer murmur of the Taw. And the older traveller in the corner seat dreams of a time of challenge and driving steam through winter. Except for the rare signal lamp, you drove by sound, counting seconds for the next echo. 1, 2. Beyond the buffer beam there was nothing but flooded fields, from Newbridge to the Pill Bridge, the track a causeway between water, and the regulator slammed shut for the river bend by Portsmouth Arms, where the water would suck every bit of ballast out of the track. There was little to guide you into lamplit platforms to make sure your tail end was comfortably in. Otherwise, you gave the customers a 10-foot drop into a ditch. So you tried to pick out of the dark some regular marker to stop your cab opposite a white-painted fence, or the red echo of your furnace in greenhouse glass. Young firemen, eager but green, were told to look for a white cab. Rain seared your eyeballs, cascaded off the cab sheet. But the storm made a closer partnership of man and machine. Steam was unpredictable. She'd act like a lady in a heat wave or the cold, then snub you if you fed her on small stuff. Wet sludge turned into cement, and she'd have you on your knees before you got to the climbs. She'd fry your breakfast on a shovel and freeze your back for arthritis. You had to be her master, know every nut and bolt, how to seal a burst pipe or change a water gauge. Making time up the valley was a goal every trip. And when the woods beat back that mile-a-minute rhythm, that was teamwork. And there was a pride in keeping it going, whatever God sent. Late August 1978. The lonely up platform where wild birds nest close to the windows to watch the last trains of summer. A clay train down from Torrington along the Tor, the only remnant of line beyond Barnstaple. When the Great Western surveyed its own route into North Devon from Taunton, the London South Western bribed the local gentry to oppose it, offering a branch from here to South Moulton. Lord Fortescue challenged their right to deprive thousands of a rail service. Devon wasn't there to await the company's pleasure. The evening train from Exeter comes in for the last lap. The last lap. For train guard beer, it was the first lap, packed with holidaymakers bound for home, sore with standing and sunburn, haggling over reservations, juggling the corner seats for the kids, with grannies all facing the engine. The last lap for train guard Woodger, coming into the junction on a streaming night to listen to a story of headlights flying through the air at the Chapelton crossing. But the splinters of an unfastened door showed how the train had knocked the lamps from the level crossing gates. the last lap for a century of steamers, and that very first train in August 1854. And people from the district packed the river banks to watch it rumble over the 3 iron arches of the Pill Bridge. Over the bridge and into the junction it went, now all agog with public rejoicing, where officers of the corporation poured corn oil and wine as an oblation, and the provincial grand chaplain offered a prayer to the success of the railway. The summer of '69. She'd be one of the last trains for Ilfracombe, a holiday special, on one of the last stretches of the withered arm, the old London and South West Railway. There's bits and pieces of it all around Dartmoor and Devon, empty cuttings, signal cabins, foxgloves over them all gone, without a whisper. A holiday special. In its heyday, 10,000 people would use that yard on a Saturday. That was why in 1870 a railway meant new hopes, a new prosperity. It nearly developed into a war of rights when the local gentry opposed the line. Windows were smashed, riots broke out, and back along the route where the line must go, the people of Braunton went up on the hill and burnt the squire. Well, in effigy anyway. So in came the navvies, down went the line, and on opening day 1874, they decked out an arch, just here, all in flowers, with London to Ilfracombe, united in bonds of iron. Yet in less than a century, Ilfracombe replaced the bonds with ties of tarmac. Railwaymen with petitions to sign were told by hoteliers to change their cause for car parks. Freight out of Ilfracombe died the same way. 1 6-ton and 2 3-ton lorries usually worked the station yard. A checker, 5 clerks and 2 unloaders manned the goods shed, which has been stacked to the roof, whilst another 6 to 10 wagon loads were waiting on the rails outside. The control centre of it all worked to the full, with a goods yard, runarounds, coach sidings, turntable, and a double main line in and out of Combe. The Atlantic Coast Express was a regular morning up train, winter and summer. Then there was the Devon Bell, and the regular morning circus of getting the observation coach onto the turntable for the return trip. Just a bit of Southern Rail luxury which never paid its way, except Saturdays. You could have filled a rake of coal wagons with passengers on those summer Saturdays. The 8:30 train to Manchester was fondly known as the Palestine Express. If cattle had been loaded the same way, there'd have been a summons for cruelty. But for the foreman, it was a pleasure to go to work. They call it the Bank, a steady rise of 1 in 30, all the way from Ilfracombe to Mortehoe. With no level run for a take-off, it was one of the toughest starts for heavily packed trains on railways anywhere. It was common for a West Country engine to get stuck on the bank, and it took the fireman's reputation firmly through the mud. There was the pull of the gradient and the pull against the curves. The whole weight of the train ground against the high rail, this one on the outside of the curve. New rails were always being laid. Summertime services kept up to 4 old veterans on hand to serve as banker engines, sharing the grind and the glory with the shiny West Country class up front. 3 pairs of men, driver and fireman, were based at Ilfracombe. Among their own kind, in their own depot, they became legends in their own right. Bertie Johns, George Tucker, Rega Ackland. Bertie Johns was slow and steady, always got there. George Tucker, madder than the March hare. And the guards got to know these men, became part of the team. On the long, slow haul up the bank, he could tell by the thrust and the sound of the pistons whether there'd be a late start out of Mortehoe. With Bertie Johns, that was unlikely. A man with his lifetime service in steam, he coaxed, coddled, and talked the engine up to the summit. "Come on, old girl," with a respectful kick of the firebox, was all the engine needed to respond to, and the men up front to live up to. For the team made the power which lived in steam. Pride, too, which kept the brasswork shiny, the gauges at full, and the schedule on time. Though the diesel is easy and don't need a nurse, it's power without soul, and I knows nothing worse. Not every customer spent his time looking at the best coastline in the west. One evening just about here, the guard was told of a passenger who'd taken a can of cream from the luggage van. Cream was carted in £7 tins, Devonshire cream, so called, made in Wiltshire. The guard asked him what possessed him to steal the stuff, and he said he'd been parted from his wife for rather a long time and thought it would make a nice present for her. It proved to be a very expensive one. There are 3 of these crossings, all manned, between Mortehoe and Braunton. A simple locking system prevents the signals showing clear until the gates have been opened. But 40 trains a day working double track puts any system to the test and finds the weakness. That turned out to be the wicket gates, which had no locks. Half a mile down at Headon Mill, a child waited for an up train to steam by, ran through the wicket gate, straight into the path of the Down Express. Timetables for the crossing keepers never allowed for illness. His wife would take over his duties immediately, and those warning bells, duplicated in the cabin and the cottage, would have wakened the dead, let alone one busy housewife. Braunton, a stop for the beach parties for Saunton and Croyd, a yard full of buses, once pony and trap, and the best railway hydrangea a whole platform long. Well, that was in the days when the staff numbered 8, not 2 on a shift, and local industries overworked the goods yard. The bulb farm sent 1,000 baskets a day, sugar beet, pottery, rabbits up to 3 tons a day, and there were very special occasions when children lined the fences at a safe distance to see their own rodeo show, loading prize cattle for the Bath and West or Devon County shows. The station foreman could remember only one accident. An elderly woman used those faulty wicket gates to cross behind a shunting train, was knocked down and lost an arm. During the war, there was a large American army camp nearby, so evening trains had plenty of customers. The late special, fondly dubbed the Braunton Boozer, left Barnstaple at 10:30, full and bursting, with the clientele feeling much the same way. Seating problems drifted into luggage racks, even down to the buffers, and the train would stop half a dozen times to the alarm chain being pulled, in mistake for something else, no doubt. All right, so it's just another branch line closing down, but it's closing down people too. 40 years of a man's career, porter, guard, station master. It's closing down a bit of history. 4 years of slog with pick and shovel, cutting that road up through the bank, making a mountain top at Coombe. It's closing down nearly a century of steamers, whistling up through the valley, pushing through fog on a winter's night, still on time, or coming through the dawn 2 hours late from a bombing raid at Waterloo.
please visit our website for news about new productions that are on the way, and you can support my work on my Patreon page.